Hi guys and welcome to the Poker Essays channel. One of the more popular videos on this channel was my German video on starting hands charts in No Limit Texas Hold'em poker. Over time, the viewers' top requests have been to re-upload with improved sound quality, as well as providing the video's content in English language. So to hit two birds with one stone, in this video I will show you which hands you want to consider before the flop to enter No Limit Texas Hold'em and why it is sometimes the best strategy to mug your cards hand after hand. Because of the blinds that you have to pay regardless of your playing decisions, in No Limit Texas Hold'em poker you can't just sit at the table and watch the other players play, unless you are eager to take losses by force. This means that you should play at least once every 6 hands on average for 6 players, that is 16% of the time, at least once every 10 hands on average for 10 players, that is 10% of your possible starting hands, and heads up for 2 players, at least 50% of all starting hands. If you choose to play fewer hands on average, your opponents could simply fold every time you enter a hand, which means you will win less chips without a fight than you lose through the blinds. In practice, however, your opponents won't be so attentive, especially in fun-oriented games, which means that you can play a very abstinent playing style, also called tight in poker language, if it suits your general approach to the game. In this video, I would like to give you recommendations on how to get a solid starting position, especially against other recreational players, whether online or in the casino. If at one point or another you feel that you cannot follow the recommendations, I recommend you to repeat your studies on the rules of No Limit Texas Hold'em poker. In MP2, you can afford to wait for the best starting hands and only play when your hand really allows it, so do not bluff. If you follow this video's recommendation, you can play 126 hands in MP2 out of a total of 1,326 possible starting hands, which is about 9%. While this is less than the 16% minimum at tables with 6 active players, it is the early positions at the table that are the most difficult to play from the flop onwards. So even if your opponents were to adapt to your abstinent playing style in MP2 and give up every time you enter the hand, your losses in that positions would not be exorbitant, and you would be able to win back the lost chips in a better position later in the game. I suggest you to raise with the red, purple and light blue hands to 4 big blinds. If one of your opponents raises after you, you fold the red hands, call the purple hands and re-raise the light blue hands 3 to 5 times your previous raise, depending on how many players have called your original raise. If your bet leaves you with less than 50% of your stack, you go all in. Just like in MP2, you can wait for strong starting hands in MP3 and hardly ever bluff. If you follow the given recommendations, you will play 194 of 1,326 possible starting hands in MP3, which is about 14% of the hands. Due to the tight playing style, MP3 is still well below the 20% minimum that one could expect at tables with 5 active players. However, the same arguments regarding the more complicated post-flop play apply to MP3 as they do to MP2. If no player has raised before you, you will raise all red, purple, orange and light blue hands to 3 big blinds plus 1 additional big blind if MP2 calls the minimum bet. If there's a raise after you, you fold the red hands, call the purple hands and re-raise the light blue and orange hands 3 to 5 times the amount of the previous raise, depending on how many players have called your original raise. You are ready to go all in with kings, queens and aces against further aggression, while you give up with king, queen suited, that is king and queen of the same color, against further aggression. If you are facing an open raise from MP2, you'll only play the orange and light blue hands. You raise the light blue hands, queens and kings and aces to 3 times the original raise, willing to go all in against further aggression. King queen suited, that is king and queen of the same suit, you raise as a bluff to 3 times the original raise but give up against further aggression. If your bet leaves you with less than 50% of your stack, you go all in. In the cutoff, you can play significantly more hands and bluff a little more often. If you follow the recommendations given, you'll play 310 hands out of 1326 in the cutoff, which is about 23% of the possible starting hands and is already relatively close to the 25% one could expect at a table with 4 active players. If no player has raised before you, you will raise all red, purple, orange and light blue hands to 3 big blinds plus 1 additional big blind for each player who calls the minimum bet before you. If there is a raise after you, you fold the red hands, call the purple hands and re-raise the light blue and orange hands 3 to 5 times the amount of the previous raise, depending on how many players have called your original raise. You are ready to go all in with the light blue hands against further aggression, while you give up with the orange hands against further aggression. If the raise was made before you, you will play only the orange and light blue hands. The light blue hands, queens, kings, aces and ace-king are re-raised 3 times the original raise and you shuffle in against further aggression. Queen-jack suited and jack-10 suited are re-raised as a bluff to 3 times the original raise, but you give up against further aggression. If your bet leaves you with less than 50% of your stack, you go all in. For the button and the small blind, I recommend that you use an identical strategy for the starting hands. This is because the advantages and disadvantages of these positions roughly balance each other out in the game. While you still have to play against 2 other players in the button, the small blind and the big blind, you only have 1 player behind you in the small blind. However, the button may act as the last player in all subsequent betting rounds and therefore has an advantage over the small blind, who must act first in all subsequent betting rounds. If you follow the given recommendations, you will play 590 out of 1326 hands in the button and in the small blind, which corresponds to about 44% of the possible starting hands. That is, in the button, due to your positional advantage, significantly more than the 33% one could expect at a table with 3 active players. But in the small blind, slightly less than the lower limit of 50% one would expect at a table with only 2 active players. If no player has raised before you, you will raise all red, purple, orange and light blue hands to 3 big blinds plus 1 additional big blind for each player who calls the minimum bet before you. If you think the players behind you are very tight, you might consider raising the button and the small blind to only 2.5 big blinds plus 1 additional big blind for each player who just calls the minimum bet. If there is a raise after you, you fold the red hands, call the purple hands and re-raise the light blue and orange hands by 3 to 5 times the amount of the previous raise, depending on how many players came in after your original raise. Like in the other positions, you are ready to go all in with the light blue hands against further aggression, while you give up with the orange hands against further aggression. If the raise was made before you, you'll play only the orange and light blue hands. The light blue hands, queens, kings, aces and ace-king, you re-raise to 3 times the original raise and go all in against further aggression. The orange hands, 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited and 8-7 suited, you raise as a bluff to 3 times the original raise, but give up against further aggression. If your bet leaves you with less than 50% of your stack, you go all in. In the big blind, you win the blinds if all players in front of you fold. If no player has raised before you, but simply joined with a minimum bet, I recommend that you follow the appropriate guidelines for the button and the small blind. If a raise was made before you, I recommend that you follow the guidelines for the position from which you were raised. This means that the light blue and orange hands for that position will be re-raised to 3 to 5 times the original raise, depending on how many players have already entered. Against further aggression, you go all in with the light blue hands and give up with the orange hands. An exception are the pocket pairs. Even if they are marked red in the respective charts, you can usually always call them after a raise, as long as no further raise can be made after you. If your bet leaves you with less than 50% of your stack, you go all in. In this video, I have given you some recommendations which will help you as a beginner with your orientation and as an advanced player to challenge and sharpen your own game again and again. Of course, all recommendations are only to be understood as an introduction to the sophisticated topic of starting hands. However, in practice and in fun-oriented games, the strategies shown can be a good starting point. Did you like the video? Then consider liking the video. Which videos do you like better, German or English videos? Tell me in the comment section. For now, I wish you good luck at the tables and I'm looking forward to the next video.